Hello, welcome to Cubs PS Plus, the Northside Numbers Game, a weekly podcast that dives headfirst into the analysis of hot topics driving Chicago Cubs baseball. I'm your host, Mike Waller, a lifelong Cub fan, full-time baseball stat nerd, and sometime youth baseball coach. Cubs PS Plus is now part of the Fans First Sports Network as part of Bleacher Bunch Productions, joining great shows like The Son Ranto Show, Cup of Cubby Blue, and Baseball Rabbit Hole. In the coming weeks, I'll begin to move this podcast under that umbrella. I'm excited about the change, and I hope you all find some additional Cubs content that you can enjoy. In addition to the podcast feeds, you can also find me on Twitter, X, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at Cubs PS Plus, the spin on the baseball metric OPS Plus. Love the pod or hate it, please drop a review wherever it is you find your podcasts. If you've done that, thank you so much. Maybe you can share an episode with a friend. You can also support the Cubs PS Plus podcast through Patreon at cubspsplus.patreon.com. There are multiple support tiers, and Patreon members will always have access to ad-free episodes, plus additional perks. Welcome into episode 58, the Rodney Myers episode of this podcast. Myers was part of the Cubs bullpen in 1998 and 1999 before being traded in early 2000 to San Diego for Gary Matthews Jr., son of the Sarge, who was a key part of the 1984 division winner on the north side that I grew up watching. Today I got to sit down and talk Cubs with Cody Delmendo from the CHGO Cubs podcast. We had this interview prearranged, but through sheer dumb luck we were able to spend the bulk of the pod talking about the very surprising Craig Counsell hire, in addition to thoughts on what the hire and this offseason mean for the Cubs as they try to get back into championship contention. Are you ready? I'm ready. Here we go. This week I'm thrilled to be joined by Cody Delmendo from the CHGO Cubs podcast. Cody, we had this lined up, but I had no idea what we'd be all set to talk about tonight.
I know. The timing of this podcast, you couldn't have done it better. You couldn't have done it better.
No. So obviously we're talking about the Cubs hiring Craig Counsell and letting David Ross go. So I listened to your guys' pod yesterday, you and Luke and Corey and Ryan. When did that break in relation to when you guys typically go? I know off season a lot of times you're 1:20, right? Is your live show?
Yeah, we always do our show.
Did you guys go on time yesterday?
We started earlier actually.
Okay. I
think the news broke around 12:30, and then we went live on CHGO Sports YouTube channel around 1 o'clock. I think we did a lot of freaking out / chaos in our office because we were all mind blown, and then we were trying to make sure that like this wasn't some fake Ken Rosenthal account, and right, exactly. Then like all these other accounts like Jeff Passan and Jesse Rogers started pushing the story out there too. So it's like, okay, we're doing this, and like we had already had a show planned to talk about Stroman opting out and Hendricks and Gomes getting their options picked up and all these other things. And this news just drops out of nowhere, and we're like, "Holy shit!" Like this is obviously we have to just completely scrap this. Yeah. And this is we talked for an hour and a half about Craig Counsell being the Cubs' new manager, and so I think that's one of the coolest things about what we do at CHGO is emergency podcasts, like whether it's a player signing or David Ross getting let go and Cubs hiring Craig Counsell out of nowhere. We try and be as fast as possible. If we had any idea that perhaps that was going to happen, I think maybe we would have even been able to start earlier than just a half hour after the news came out. But it was a pretty chaotic day, and my mom, she had never been in our office before, and I brought her for the first time.
That's right. She was in the audience yesterday.
Yeah. So she got to witness like what it's like at our office when like huge news breaks and stuff like that. So
it
was kind of cool.
Cody at work.
Yeah. It was just one of those like cool things to kind of show her like what I get to do on a daily basis. Except this time it was like the cool part, It wasn't just another, especially in the off season where nothing's really happened yet and stuff like that.
Well, obviously we'll talk a bunch more about that, but so I wasn't familiar with you at all until I started picking up the CHGO podcast last year. And honestly, sure. I found that because I'd been a longtime listener of Brendan and Corey. Yeah. So you guys picked up that podcast, and I was like, all right, I guess I got to go tune in, and it's a fun show. I like it. But like, how'd you wind up there? What's your background?
So I kind of been doing been trying to get in the media game for a long time before CHGO. I got a degree in journalism in college, and I worked downstate in Illinois. I don't know where you live, but I grew up in like central Illinois. I lived in Peoria for a little bit, covered some high school sports, worked at a radio group part-time, doing a bunch of work that none of the people who had been there for a long-term amount of time wanted to do. Just trying to get my name out there, trying to build my resume. I got burnt out at one point and realized that maybe I just need to find something else that maybe I can still use my degree for. So I went and started working in social media marketing companies. That's why a lot of people in our office say that I'm like one of the best social media.
Oh, you're a great follow.
It's not even just like what I tweet. It's just more of like when I do things, like the timing, all kinds of stuff.
You've got your style. It works.
But yeah, I got my style. But I was helping companies build their brands or whatever. A lot of them were like companies that were ran by people who just weren't part of the social media era growing up. And I'm a millennial. Millennials were part of the social media era,
Absolutely.
like the very beginning. So it's just like it was very easy for me to figure out like, okay, this is what works, this is what doesn't work, this is what you got to do, blah blah blah. And so I did a lot of that type of stuff for a few years. And in the process, I kind of missed being able to talk about sports and stuff like that. And that led to me starting my own podcast. And I started a podcast in the beginning of 2020, worst possible time to start a podcast. And I did it with an old college buddy. And, we were just doing it for fun, obviously. And at the time I was kind of like, well, this can just be my outlet and to talk about sports. And, if it leads to something great. I ended up having Kevin Kaduk on the podcast like maybe 3 or 4 weeks after I started the show. At the time, he was pushing, or he had just started his Chicago sports newsletter. At the time, it was called Midway Minute. He's kind of brought it over to CHGO now, and it's obviously rebranded. But he, at the time, I was like, I saw he was pushing it. I had no idea who he was, but I just realized that he used to work at Yahoo, and he's a Chicago sports fan. I was like, oh, we should have him on, and kind of researched him a little bit, found out like what he'd been doing. And so I was like, if we get this guy on, maybe he'll help promote our show. Right. Yeah. And I had him on. He was super awesome. And we talked for like an hour and just about Chicago sports and, helped promote the newsletter. And he, was kind of like one of those, like, I'll do a favor for you, you do a favor for me. Type things. Like I promoted the newsletter for him and he promoted our show. So, and then after that, we just kind of remained kind of close friends, at least on social media. I'd never met him until eventually in 2022 when CHGO launched, or right before CHGO launched. He was DMing me, telling me, he's got this cool opportunity. He somehow got in with the All City Network, which is the overall branch of like where CHGO, PHNX, and DMVR and PHLY are under. He somehow got involved with, the people at the top, and they hired him to be the head of content for when CHGO launched. And when it came to trying to find talent for the CHGO Cubs podcast, he thought of me. And so
that's so cool.
He reached out to me on Twitter in my DMs. I was working at the time at my previous job. I was just working at home, like on a Friday at 3 p.m., like not actually working. I was just like, sitting at my desk doing nothing. I get a random DM from him, and I'm like, all right, cool. Like, who knows what this could be, right? I was thinking, at best is like, oh, maybe it's like some cool freelance thing or something like that. But no, he gets me on a phone call. He tells me all about CHGO and what they want, like what they envision it to be and all this stuff. And I remember saying to him straight, like on the phone, was like, you're punking me, right? Like you're bullshitting me. Like this cannot possibly be real. I think I gave it 3-4 hours of thought, talked to my mom about it, talked to my then girlfriend about it. And like I couldn't pass the opportunity up. So I'm glad I didn't, because we've grown so much since we launched, and there's been a ton of success for not only me but everyone else at the company. And yeah, it's a wild story. It's not like the traditional path I feel like a lot of people should be taking to get into media, but I always emphasize networking being like the biggest reason how I got here. Knowing the right people at the right time kind of, is a big part of how I got this job. And I do think that just genuinely, in general, being just a nice guy, because, I was a nice guy to him. And for some reason, I stuck in his head when it came to trying to find someone to do a Cubs podcast. And before CHGO, like, I had kind of built my brand on Twitter being like a Cubs fan anyway. So that certainly helped. I figured out how to build a following on social media, at least on Twitter, at least. And I hate saying it like this, but like, I know I'm a lot bigger now than I was 19 months ago, or however many months it was ago.
Yeah, with your platform, of course you are.
You're right. So, I think that's the best, the shortest and best way to be able to explain all of that and how I got here. So yeah,
I'm always a big fan of the unusual paths. I mean,
absolutely.
Similarly, like, I have a journalism degree too, but I worked for 20 years in tech. Like, I got away from it and started this podcast last summer as a way I just needed that outlet again. And it's been really interesting to watch the Cubs, especially the Cubs podcast landscape. I've been a fan of podcasts for a long time. Yeah. But there's so many different kinds. Like, you guys come every day with the content. You've got a beat writer right there in the room.
Yeah.
Like, you guys can do things that I can't. So, like, that's a whole area though that I don't have to cover. Like, I don't have to be a breaking news podcast. And you've got Ian Happ, you've got players podcasts out there. You've got other writers. Kaplan's been around forever and his weekly show. And it's been kind of interesting to try to maneuver and try to find a niche and an audience. And I love this space. It's a good time.
Yeah. No, I will say one of the coolest things since, getting the gig is being able to meet a lot of the other, Cubs content creators. Obviously, most of them, a large majority of them are all from Cubs Twitter. I know there's definitely some people that I have opinions about, but I will not name them here. But overall, there are a lot of great people. I love the guys at Bleacher Nation. I was following those guys since college. So even before college, I think I was following the Bleacher Nation Facebook when I was probably right when I graduated from high school. I think I remember that's when I first started seeing their posts. So they've been around for a very long time, and I respect a lot of like what Brett and Michael and Luis and Eli and anyone else that I'm missing from over there. But they're real, and on top of it, they're just really good dudes. And then the Evan Altman at Cubs Insider, I've gotten the chance to meet him. He's a really nice guy. And I love the prospect dudes too, even though I'm not the biggest prospect like nerd or anything like that. But
I've got Huss coming on again next week.
Nice. Yeah. Greg Huss is my guy. He's a huge Illinois fan too, which allows us to talk about more than just the Cubs. And Greg Zumack, we've had him on our show a few times.
He does the draft so well. I mean, he does everything great, but
he does. Yes.
With the draft.
He does. We had him on like right after the draft, and he was just so knowledgeable about who the Cubs got and that type of stuff. So yeah, I could keep going. There's so many other great names. I'm good friends with Danny Rocket, even though he's just another fan like I am and anyone else. But like the San Ranto show is it's unique. It's definitely unique, and you have to.
I'm actually joining up under their umbrella here in the next few weeks. So.
Nice, yeah.
And that's one of the angles why I wanted to have you on, because like there's a lot of cynicism among Cubs fans, and I know one of your taglines is "I'm ready to be hurt again." And that's what being a Cubs fan is.
Right.
And so when was the first time? What was your big first Cubs disappointment? Was it 2003?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think I was just like in shock and in more like I would say it was my first heartbreak for sure.
Yeah.
I always tell people like that was like, I don't know if I was disappointed. I just think I experienced heartbreak for the first time. And at that time, I saw them go as far as they did. It's not like, and I was so young. I managed to still I brought myself into thinking that, oh, they'll get back there next year. No problem. Like that, this team was good this year. They'll get back there. And then they didn't. And I started to realize what it really is like to be a Cubs fan. And that's what led in 2008. I think that's the first time that I truly was disappointed. Like best team in the National League all season, 98 wins, gets swept in playoffs by the Dodgers. Like, and I was a little bit older, so I gravitated to guys like Derek Lee, Aramis Ramirez, Carlos Zambrano, Ted Lilly, a lot of those guys. And so I feel like 2008 was definitely more of a disappointment. 2003 was just like one of the first times I've ever been just legitimately sad about like sports. I still had this delusion that the Cubs were going to just be good for the foreseeable future at that point. And so I think when I think back to that year as a kid and growing up where I grew up, I just think about all the trash talk I had to deal with from Cardinal fans the next day, and just how, like, honestly, I use a lot of that as part of like the bits on social media, on Twitter, taking any chance to dunk on that organization, just because like that's just how it was when I was a kid. Like the amount of times I had to hear Cubs suck or completely useless by September from a lot of their fans, and all the stupid taglines that stupid fan base has. Like, yep. It is part of like the bit. Like, I just think about a lot of the stuff that like traumatized me in some aspect when I was a kid, and it goes into, stupid tweets. But yeah, no, that's as much as like that team just really like made me sad. I don't think I was disappointed like perhaps you probably were, or someone that was like older.
Yeah, and for me, like I was 10 in '84 when Sandberg won the MVP, and so like I got hooked on the Cubs a couple years before, so I'm like 3 years into being a fan of baseball. Like lovable losers, the Cubs are awesome. Like this isn't that hard. Right. Oh, I had no idea what was coming. So like, yeah, '84 was probably like 2003 was for you, but then by the time I had already been through '89 and '98 and got to 2003, and then it was like, well, shit, okay, this is just how it is. Like,
yeah.
I'm not sure any of us. I didn't fully believe 2016 until the game was over, and maybe they were off the field. I'm not sure while they were celebrating. I totally believed it yet.
Right.
Yeah. It's actually cool. This last night, my youngest was 5 when they won the World Series, and he did not make it through that game. And he and I have been talking about watching that thing, and so we watched it last night, and it was cool. Like he knew they won, but he didn't know the ins and outs of the game. Yeah. He's watching it, thinking like, "Ooh, this is not good," and like. He even said at one point, "I wish I didn't know the outcome." Just like the drama of the game, it was kind of cool to see it through his eyes. But
right.
So one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is like I think you and I tend to come at things from more of the optimistic perspective.
For sure, I try to be. I think what's funny when you say that is like a lot of people on Twitter sometimes think I can be too negative. And I've realized, or I've learned, that it just doesn't matter. I'm never going to please everyone. But at the same time, like I do think I'm an optimistic Cubs fan more than anything else. I want to believe that the team is going to be good. I want to believe that there's things to look forward to. I want to believe in like the stuff that the organization is pushing to us is true, and that it's going to play out that way. But obviously there have been times where, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, where, when I don't feel good about something, I'm going to tell you, like, you know what I mean? And that's another thing that I think is cool about what we do at CHGO. No one's holding us back from saying what we want. And there's a lot of other outlets where they are. So you
guys get to react game by game. So like, one day you can be, that game was awful, everything sucks, and we're all going to die. And the next day you're chugging out of a beer bat. Like,
right, exactly. So, but again, I try to be as optimistic as I can, and I would say I'm about as optimistic as I've been over the last 4 years. Yeah. This offseason, the start of this offseason, I don't think I felt this optimistic in these last 4 years.
So last year going in, you and I both had picked the Cubs for more wins than most people. I was I actually got the 83 right, but it didn't happen at all how I thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
You were like 88, 89. Like what were you seeing last year? Were you just like taking the high side of all the potential splits?
Are you talking about the 2022 season?
No, 2023.
Oh, okay, 2023. Okay, because 2022, I stupidly said like 85 wins.
Oh, actually,
the guys in the office like totally like still give me shit about it. But yeah, this year I did go 88. I guess what I fully believed in the Cody Bellinger resurgence. Like I really like get him back with his hitting coach, change of scenery. I'm a real firm believer in change of scenery. I mean, if I felt like Tim Anderson could play third base, I would be begging the Cubs to go sign him because I just think he needs a change of scenery. It's just one bad year,
turn around,
yeah. Just to see what would happen. But I don't think he can play third base, so I don't want him. But yeah, I was all in on Cody Bellinger being, getting it back to, if not MVP form, a very good baseball player. I was a full believer on Nico Hoerner building off 2022, where he was like a 4 WAR player, ended up being a 4.7 WAR player this year. I believed that him and Dansby were going to be one of the best defensive up the middles in baseball, and that with all these ground ball pitchers the Cubs had, they'd be, that was how they're going to get a bulk of their outs. And I thought Justin Steele was going to build off 2022. I didn't expect Cy Young. I can say that much. Or at least, we haven't talked about this enough or at least I haven't talked about this enough with anyone yet, but the fact that he wasn't a finalist I don't understand that.
And Logan Webb was?
Yeah, right.
I mean, of course, Snell and Gallen were going to be, but
right.
Yeah.
But, like, again, like a guy like Steele, I thought he could build off it. I thought Stroman would be, as good as he was in the second half of 2022, and turned out he was better, but then was hurt the other half. And I think that's the biggest reason why they didn't make the playoffs. I was optimistic on Tyone. That turned out to be wrong, but it didn't matter. They still won 83 games anyway. And then when you think of guys like Jordan Wicks, who came up and was big for them, I thought that he would be up earlier. And I thought that, other, like maybe some of those bullpen guys that they've had in Iowa all of last year, and guys like Jeremiah Estrada, who just got let go, and Daniel Palencia was going to come and make an impact. And I guess I was just optimistic on a lot of the young guys, and I thought Morel would be better than what he was in the second half of 2022. And I'm watching a dog, and he just keeps jumping up here.
I love dogs. All good.
Right. Same. He's a good boy. His name's Milo.
Nice.
So I could keep naming guys, but I felt like going into the year, I thought if there was anything that was going to really hurt this team, was that they didn't really have a third baseman that you wanted to play consistently there every day, unless his name was Christopher Morel, which they never really gave him a full opportunity to. I thought that, I thought if things didn't go well, it was because of third base, and I thought that the bullpen would not be as good as I'd hoped. And the bullpen was not as good as I had hoped for the first 2 months. Then they figured it out. And then it got to a point where they were in so many close games and they had too many injuries that they were just, and they weren't deep enough. They didn't get any, like, none of the guys out of the bullpen came up and were effective. Like when I say the guys out of the bullpen from the farm, none of them came up and were like immediately effective. And, I'm talking about me being optimistic going into offseason. Like I'm hopeful that a guy like Hayden Wisniewski can can find a way to be more effective next year. A guy like Daniel Palencia who can throw triple digits. I'm hoping he can build off the experience he has, but can be better. I mean, there's a lot of high upside with both those guys, I feel. Like Keegan Thompson was a massive disappointment this year, and he was great in 2022. Can he get back to that kind of level? But he's also a big reason why I felt like they, not necessarily the reason they missed the playoffs, but a big reason why the bullpen fell apart, right? Like he came into 2023 with like, oh, you're going to be a workhorse in this bullpen. And he wasn't outside of maybe April.
Well, Brandon Hughes didn't pitch hardly at all.
And Brandon Hughes, yeah, and he was a lefty, which was huge. They didn't have enough lefties. Yeah, so I thought the bullpen, like if they didn't make the playoffs, it's going to be because of the bullpen, and the offense just not being consistent enough, or being good at all. And it turned out the offense actually, I think, was better than a lot of us really expected at all. And they just never could stay, like they can never find the middle ground. They were either really good and they made you feel like they could go out there and beat anyone, or they were the worst team in baseball. Yeah. There was no middling ground. Like they just, like, it was so agonizing at the end because I held myself back for the first 3.5 months of the year. I think I tweeted it out in August after they won the series against the Braves. I was like, I have officially fallen in love with the 2023 Cubs. After they won the series against the Braves, I was like, all right, I've fallen this, because I was at that last game of that series against the Braves, and that game was incredible. The way that it played out and the vibes I felt in the left field bleachers at Wrigley Field was incredible. And I was like, I feel like we're going to play October baseball. It feels like we're going to play in October, and things just it's so unfortunate and agonizing how the rest of the season played out. And it did take away a lot of like the good things that came from this season, for me at least. I know a lot of people, there was a lot of debate on Twitter, especially about, like, the future's bright, everything's going to be okay, like, you don't have to be upset about this. And then I saw the other side where it's like, you had a 4-game lead in the second wild card spot in the beginning of September and you blew it. And it's like, that's how I felt. That's how I felt. Like, I felt so strongly about that team surprising a lot of people and getting in that wild card spot. Hell, they easily could have got in the division if they didn't completely fall apart. I think they got within a game and a half after sweeping the Giants. And like, it just fell apart.
One thing I started thinking about, and I talked about this on one of my episodes, I was thinking back I've been a Cubs fan for like 40 years, and the Cubs most of that time just have not been any good. And I went back thinking like 84, 89, 98, around those years, there really weren't any other years where they even contended. And I was thinking back that I could only think of about 3 or 4 seasons that were legitimately disappointing where they were in contention and didn't make the postseason in some way, shape, or form. And 2018 was a weird thing where they won 95 games, but they wound up in the wild card and they lose it, and that was not great. But like 2004, like you alluded to it earlier, that's one of the most bitter seasons I've had as a Cubs fan.
Yeah.
And this year wound up being kind of in that boat. So in that context, like now let's jump to Craig Counsell. Like what difference... I think we'd agree. I assume you agree that he's an upgrade over David Ross.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that, and this is what I think. I don't know how anyone could disagree, but it's not like you can measure it. It's not like you can go back and see if it would play out. But I firmly believe that the Cubs would have made the playoffs if they had Craig Counsell as the manager. They would have had the same expectations with Craig Counsell as the manager coming into the year, given the roster. But the thing about what Craig Counsell has done with the Brewers over these last 5-6 years or whatever is he just makes all the right moves, like on the margins, right? Like he knows when to take one of his guys out who started and brings in the right bullpen guy. He knows how to manage a bullpen. And I'm not saying that David Ross didn't know how to manage a bullpen. That was one of the few things I thought he was good at. It's just that there wasn't enough depth in the bullpen, especially in September this year. So I'm not necessarily saying that I didn't think David Ross couldn't do that, but I feel like when it comes to Craig Counsell, he has proven that he can do that. He makes I will say I think his lineups are consistently better. Whenever the Cubs would play the Brewers this year, it was consistently Christian Yelich, William Contreras, 1 and 2 at the top of the lineup, and they never bunted. Like these little things, and I just feel like, especially in September, if Craig Counsell was the manager for the Cubs, I think they would have found out a way to get in the playoffs. And like, speaking of September, how many years with Milwaukee did Craig Counsell get his guys to play up to par, to play up to be, like it's playoff baseball, and they play their best baseball of the entire regular season in September normally. And that's one reason why they went from 1.5 games back at the beginning of September to 7, 8, 9 games back. You know what I mean? Like the Brewers played well in September this year. And so I just think as a manager and as a whole, he has proven to be very, very good. And I'm not saying that I think he's going to be the greatest manager of all time or even is in this moment. Anyone who says that is delusional. It's not like he's gone out there and won a World Series or helped a team or been part of a World Series team, but he's certainly an upgrade from David Ross based off everything we've seen from David Ross. And I commend the Cubs front office for doing it. Like,
that was a huge move.
It's a huge move. And like I said this on today's show, I don't know if you listened to it, but I think you want to talk about loyalty and like the relationship that Jed Hoyer and David Ross and Tom Ricketts all had together. Think about the other team on the south side of Chicago with Jerry Reinsdorf and the front offices that he's had on not just the White Sox, but even the Bulls. Yeah. He's had Jerry Reinsdorf didn't even fire John Paxson and Gar Forman, or John Paxson at least. He didn't fire John Paxson from the Bulls. John Paxson had to literally step down because he was just he felt like it was time finally when it was way past overdue. And it's like the same situation with the White Sox with Rick Hahn and Kenny Williams, except they actually did eventually fire them. But I think you can argue that it was way past due in some aspects, considering how long they'd been there and how bad they've basically been over their entire tenure. And it was all based off loyalty. Like those were his guys, right? Mm-hmm. The fact that Jed Hoyer went to Tom Ricketts and said, we need to get this guy, blah, 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 blah. And Tom Ricketts said, okay. Like, sure, it's going to make Jed look like this asshole, I guess, because like, it's not like the Cubs were looking for a manager or anything. Like,
right.
If you've read the Athletic story and all this, like the Cubs clearly were not trying to go find a new manager. He just became available.
Did you see Bruce Levine's report?
I did not.
Sarah Sanchez had shared it. Okay. Bruce Levine's reporting that Craig Counsell contacted the Cubs.
Really? Okay. I'll have to go read that.
When teams were in and saying that, hey, I don't know, is there a way? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, maybe the Cubs had called them first and then he came through, but he was definitely interested and they made it happen. And I still don't know. It's amazing that they got that pulled off in 30 hours with no leaks. Right.
And, to finish off my point is that, no, you're fine. My point is that the Cubs, we can complain all we want about how the trade deadline of 2021 happened with the guys that like won the World Series and, going through a rebuild we were told was not a rebuild, whatever. They were tough decisions. And as time has gone on, it looks like they were probably the right decisions. We still have to see if Pete Crow Armstrong is going to be a great player, but it's not like Javier Baez has been playing great for the Tigers. No. Anthony Rizzo is, I think he's been
the one that
the one that's probably been the one that you probably missed the most, considering you haven't had anyone great at first base outside of Cody Bellinger. And Chris Bryant's been hurt. I can't even say he's been bad. He's just been hurt, but that was his problem here in the back end of his tenure with the Cubs, right? Kyle Schwarber is the only one where I will continuously pound that, like, the fact that you didn't get anything for him is bad. But also,
which is bizarre because he's the one they love the most.
Right. Exactly. I know.
It's wild.
But I also feel like I don't care how many times he strikes out. I don't care that he can't play any defense. And given where baseball's at right now, you'd love to have a guy like that in the lineup, especially from the left side of the plate. But whatever, not the point. To bring it around one more time, I just love the fact that the front office and ownership don't, like, as much as you say that you love this guy and loyalty and all that, it didn't hold them back from making a change that makes the organizations and team better. And you can't say that about a lot of teams in this city right now. And the Cubs are the only team in the city that has any kind of bright future. Maybe the Blackhawks, but it's still not even going to be for at least a few more years, right?
Yeah.
So and that front office hasn't proved anything yet. They got lucky and was able to get, hockey Jesus is what I've been told. And you were going to see how that plays out. But the Bulls, they're painfully mediocre and bad. The White Sox they lost 100 games in their winning window. The Bears have been awful since like I was well before college, outside of 1 year in 2018. Like, and then the Bears are the same way in some aspects. Like they never can get the guys right in the front office. I just feel like the Cubs, despite some of those decisions that we've, had to live through, and they hurt in the moment sometimes, they make the hard decisions that end up being beneficial for the organization. And
that's one thing go ahead.
I just think that they did what they had to do in this moment. Like I as a human, from the human standpoint, I feel bad for David Ross, right? Like he had to feel blindsided.
Oh, totally.
And
there's no way he could see that coming.
Right. But from a fan standpoint, it fires me up. It's like we did whatever it took to go get arguably the best manager in baseball. Arguably. I'm not saying he is, but arguably he has to be
he's up there for sure.
Top 5, right? To be able to take those Brewers teams, like those rosters, and get the best out of them year in and year out while he was there. Like, and now you bring him to an organization that has more money, more resources, and is on the come up. To me, it just makes me to me, the rest of the division, the rest of the National League, whatever, should start to look at the Cubs and be like, oh no, they're coming. And
I think that's the next step. Like, I don't think I've been a bit of a Ross defender. I think he's a solidly average manager. I think he's fine.
Yeah.
I tend to not think managers make massive difference one way or the other. But in a season like this, when the Cubs played the entire season in the margin, that's where a guy like Counsell can pay off. And I think it probably was a difference of 4 or 5 games.
For sure.
I think you put Craig Counsell managing the 2022 team and they still suck. Yeah. Because the roster just wasn't there. But what I want to see now is I've already seen all the tweets about, well, hey, now Hap's not going to be batting third. Like, well, hopefully it's because they go out and get Shohei Ohtani or trade for Soto or, upgrade the roster. And that's the next step for Jed. I think he's had a bit of I think with some fans, I think there were some arrows that probably Jed should have taken that hit Ross. Like the bullpen. I mean, I could argue he should have rested guys more, but who else was he going to go to when they're playing a 1-run game every 4 days out of 5? Jed had to do more.
Yeah. Like, one thing I'll say that I didn't like about David Ross, and I think a lot of fans agree with this, is that I know that the games mattered so much in September, but to get Alexander Canario called up and he hits a grand slam and then you don't play him the next day or even the day after that.
And they did it to Maldonado or Velasquez earlier in the year.
Yeah, they did it to Nelson Velasquez too. The thing that the difference about the two scenarios to me is that it's not like we hadn't seen Nelson Velasquez play before. Sure. And I know he went to Kansas City and he, had a great second half.
Good player, but yeah,
he'll probably be a very nice player for them. But I've already people in the YouTube chat for CHGO, like they're already like getting that, like writing receipts when it comes to like that trade in my thoughts on it, because I think Jose Cuas will be better next year because he'll be in a different role. And
I like him a lot.
Yeah, I do too. And so at the end of the day, I don't think that trade we're going to be looking at is like, oh, we just lost a Hall of Fame caliber player. But for me, like I wish you would have just played Canario more, like ride the hot hand. It was that, like, I understand Luke Little's in your bullpen and you're playing a 1-run game, but like, what's the worst that could happen when Jose Cuas's arm's about to fall off because you're using him every day? Yeah. Why not give Luke Little a chance in a 1 or 2 run game? Like,
yeah, I agree completely.
It got to the point where you just felt kind of like you were forced to have to give that guy an opportunity more. And he's not the only one. I know some of the other guys that I kind of clamored to see what they got didn't exactly do well. Like, again, I mentioned Palencia earlier. He, can be wild, walked some guys, gave up some homers, whatever. He's got great stuff, right? But like, you got to see some growth going for next year, right?
Well, PCA was a good example. Like,
but yeah, even PCA
people were
was
clamoring for PCA to play more, but I could argue he played too much.
Yeah, and some aspects
should have played a little more.
For sure. I think Canario's definitely the one that should have played more. Yeah. PCA, I like I was in Colorado for 2 of the 3 games, and he started consecutive games in a row, and he looked overmatched at the plate, but he played good defense.
I think he just started pressing. I mean, he was
right.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, the only other time I felt like after that series that he should have played more was in Arizona, and that was only because like that outfield's so huge. Yes. And he barely played. He didn't start one game. He didn't start one game in that, and I think he definitely came in for defense, but like I don't know. That was the only time. But after that it was kind of like, all right. And at that point they didn't have a good week and you needed to win games and this and that. So I understood why they didn't play him. But that was my only thing is I felt like he probably could have started 1 or 2 of those games in Arizona based off, the outfield that was there. But it wasn't even just the September call-ups this year. There were times where, you mentioned the Ian Happ hitting third thing. It was the same thing with Seiya Suzuki. Like he struggled in June and July, and David Ross consistently was hitting him fourth. He was hitting fourth like a large part of the season when he was struggling. Yeah, you could go back and look at a random lineup probably in June or July before Cody Bellinger took off, and he was hitting like 6th or 7th in some of those lineups probably. You know what I mean? Yeah. And that's the thing with him is like eventually they moved him up to 4th, but and this is why I like Craig Counsell playing Yelich and Contreras 1-2. Those are the 2 best hitters on that team. You got to be David Ross.
You get them the most at bats.
You're right. David Ross should have been hitting Cody Bellinger 3rd, and Ian Happ should have been 2nd. That's me and Luke Stuckmeyer sat on the show, and like of all the things that we agreed upon, the most it was definitely something like that. You could add
if he'll do it, I like Happ leading off.
Right. Yeah. Something like that, right? Which I honestly wouldn't mind if Ian Happ was the Cubs leadoff man next year. He had led the team in on base percentage this year, right?
If they can add a couple bats and get Happ 1 or 2, maybe you're hitting Dansby 6 or 7 instead of 5.
Yeah,
all of a sudden this lineup is totally different.
Oh, for sure, absolutely. And I guess like I've never fully of all my years watching baseball, watching the Cubs, I've never complained about how the lineup was made more than this past season. I don't think I ever have. I always found a way to justify why this guy was hitting here or why this, and even all those random Joe Madden lineups that like would always like make us all scratch our head. Like, I don't think I ever complained about him just because like he was the World Series winning manager. Like he knows more than me.
Exactly.
And so like, then you insert David Ross, who doesn't have any managerial experience. And it's just like, okay, what are you seeing that I'm not seeing? Because like this dude hadn't been hitting well in this spot for a lot of the season, but you continuously can put Ian Happ here and you're not getting Bellinger more at bats. And how many times did a game end with Ian Happ making the last out and Cody Bellinger on deck, So
probably anecdotal, but it seemed like a lot.
Right. So again, I feel bad for David Ross as from the human aspect,
he's
right?
A good dude.
He's a good dude, and he was part of like the greatest World Series championship story that will be ever told during our lifetimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just love the move that the Cubs did because it just shows that at the end of the day, they care, like whoever's in the front office cares more, and even ownership cares more about winning and the aspect of how to win and all that more than their friendships, their quote unquote loyalty, because there's too many teams in this city in Chicago where the ownership and front office are like this, like tight knit, and it holds them back from making the big splash or the big move. And I'm not saying just because the Cubs hired Craig Counsell as their manager means they're going to go win the World Series, but I certainly feel better about the team going into 2024 than I did with David Ross. And if they, I won't necessarily say run it back, but if they put together another team that is going to depend on a lot of marginal things, at least I'll feel like Craig Counsell is going to bring the best out of the team and will, instead of winning 83 games, perhaps they do win 88 or 89 games and they're, playing the wild card round or whatever. I'd much rather just win 95 plus and run away with the division and get a bye. But,
and that takes me to the next topic. Like, you led me right into it. So
okay,
if they're going to make this move and go get Craig Counsell and sort of shiv Ross in the middle of the night, basically, and push him out, I've got to think that means they're going to be aggressive. I don't think you make this move just to basically run it back and pick up 2 more Eric Hosmers.
Yeah. I mean, it would be a very disappointing offseason, in my opinion, if there isn't a major free agent signing or a major trade or something. They'd be going into the year relying on a lot of their young guys on the farm that are going to be super cheap and all this. And then it's going to change that narrative on people who don't like Tom Ricketts again. And it is what it is. But yeah, I agree though. Like to make a hire like this and then to not do way more, like bringing back Cody Bellinger, trading for Juan Soto, or signing Shohei Ohtani, or trading for Pete Alonso, trading for Shane Bieber, trading for Corbin Burns somehow, some way. You know what I mean? Like there's the Cubs farm system is so fruitful right now where they can send some guys somewhere to bring in a marquee pitcher or bring in a Juan Soto, you know what I mean, or Pete Alonso, and hopefully you can get an extension done with one of those 2 guys, whoever it is. But
and kind of look at like the Velasquez thing you were talking about. Like, if they're going to go trade for Alonso or Soto or some of those guys, you're going to give up talent. That talent may go to 5 All-Star games.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Right. I agree. As long as you're not sending them to like a rival team or, in division. I mentioned Corbin Burns, and I don't think the Brewers are going to be sending Corbin Burns to the Cubs unless the Cubs sent they'd have to send Cade Horton or something, like, even for just 1 year. They would have to.
It's triple the Cubs would have to. The Cubs.
They would have to immediately lose the trade unless they were able to re-sign Corbin Burns and whatever. But
but that's half the beauty of the Counsell thing too, right? Like you just gutted a rival.
Yeah.
Team.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah.
You shared that clip from that one Brewers podcast where the guy found out on air that that had happened, and it was just hilarious.
Oh yeah, I've watched it no less than 1,000 times today. Yeah, I think that's cool too. The fact that the Cubs finally were on the other end of like a move like this. Like last offseason had to deal with Contreras going to Cardinals, which admittedly
done it to us for generations.
Right. I will say though, related to the Contreras thing, whenever it was all talked about that it was going to happen, I fully didn't believe it was going to happen because I just thought the Cardinals were smarter. And then it turns out they weren't. And what's played out is not necessarily surprising to me. So, hate to see it, but it's that, the trade with the White Sox, even though it seems like more of a wash now. Right. And at the time it made sense for the Cubs. They were going for it in 2017 and, didn't work out, but it feels like the Cubs have always been on these, like the down ends of a lot of these trades or free agent signings, like guys who were on the Cubs that go to a rival team and stuff like that. And it's just, it's nice to be on the other end for once. And, we deserve a few victory laps on it. No doubt.
So heading into this offseason now, they've got Counsell, so they've made their splash. I think anybody who's following it, like, look at the Cubs, you have to take them seriously now. Like, they've clearly made a move. What does a successful offseason look like for you? Like, not even necessarily the dream scenario of Soto and Shohei and Bellinger and Nola, but like, what do you think they have to do this offseason?
Well, it's so hard to like say what they have to do, because like I immediately look at third base and I'm like, well, are they going to give Christopher Morel the chance? Like, are they going to give him the Nick Madrigal program or something and like make him field nothing but ground balls at third base the entire winter? Like, I know he's going to go play in the Dominican League or whatever for like a month, but like, I'm intrigued to see if he's going to play any third base there, right? Like, I would love for Morel to be able to play third base because his upside is so high, and his he's so young and under control, and like you're not paying him anything and all this, and it allows you to be able to spend money elsewhere. But at the same time, you can use him as a trade piece if you don't think he can play third. And I just feel like he's not a guy that you can just DH. Like, he's too athletic. You got to find a way to get him out there in the field. And I think he plays better in the field. I could be wrong on that. I have to look up the splits, but to me, I just feel like
he got better at it this year.
Did he?
Okay. Yeah, he did.
Well, don't let the facts get in the way of a good story.
but for the last year and the first half of this year, it's absolutely correct. He hit way worse when he was DH.
Yeah, that's what it always felt like. But so, like, when it comes to like what do the Cubs need to do, like they need to figure out third base, and just in general, they got to figure out third base. I think number one priority, just like even before the Counsell hire, and the optimism that it brought me after, like Cody Bellinger is number one priority for me. He's got to be a Chicago Cub next year. I'm not saying that you have to give him 10 years, $300 million or whatever to stick around, like do whatever it absolutely takes. But to me, like he's part of the next core. To me, he has to be. Like he's so valuable, man. Like what he did at first base for them, and center field. Like where can you find a player that versatile? I mean, the last player like that was that versatile for the Cubs, I guess, was Ben Zobrist. But shit, Cody Bellinger is a better defensive player both positions than Ben Zobrist. He was just fine. Like he was like, oh, I can play the position at a fine level. But Cody Bellinger he Gold Glove like first baseman, and he played really good center field, but can also play corner outfield too. So it's like you can play him technically at like 4 different positions.
Well, and his versatility is such a perfect match for this team.
Yes,
with the kids coming up, because I still don't know. Maybe Matt Mervis will be a dude. Maybe he won't.
Yeah,
PCA may still have to go through struggles.
Mm-hmm.
He can go either way. If all of a sudden Matt Mervis is killing it and PCA is struggling, he plays center field. If PCA is on fire and Mervis isn't the dude, then he can play first base.
It's like what we saw from PCA in September. I don't know how the organization can go into next year and be like, all right, PCA is going to be our starting center fielder opening day. And it's like
a shot at it, but
you're right. Like if they didn't
sign somebody for 6 years, like over top of him.
Right. But like what I'm saying is like PCA he unfortunately just didn't show enough for me to be like, okay, we can let Bellinger walk and we'll be fine, right? I think I'm hoping that this is how it plays out. It's going to go into January, and
it's going to be.
He probably doesn't get over $200 million on like a 6 or 7 year deal, right? I'm thinking that that's what will happen, or that's what I'm hoping that will happen, and it leads to him taking something less, but with an opt out after year 2 or 3. And that allows him to put together a couple more consistent seasons, which then allows him to potentially get paid a lot more when he's like 30. And that's what I'm hoping happens, because I think then that gives the Cubs a lot easier chance to bring him in while also being able to transition PCA or whoever it is in 2 or 3 years into center field. And we go from there. But we'll see. The Yankees, will they ever learn from their own mistakes when it comes to how they operate? I don't know. But I think that Cody Bellinger is a number one priority, and now that Stroman has opted out, I think sky's the limit when it comes to who could be. Who could
really
be in
like
the rotation.
Stroman, but that's such a gift to the Cubs.
Oh, it was such a gift. And it's actually like, it makes you wonder, like, okay, did he opt out because he didn't want to be here, or was he like, or did he legitimately?
I think there's so many teams looking for pitching
that's true.
Rolling the dice.
Yeah. It's like that too. It's like, do you think you can actually make more money considering the weak pitching market that's out there this year? And I said this.
He can certainly get more years. Like, he's only locked in for the 1 year with the Cubs. Right. Maybe he doesn't hit the AAV, but maybe he can do 3 at 18, like 354, something like that. Right.
So it, like you said, it is a gift that Stroman opted out, which I can't believe I would even think, considering how great he was the first couple months of the year. But
Again, Jed looking smart. I mean, he was never going to extend him midseason, but Stroman looks so good, and then he's like, okay, we can talk extension.
The only thing that sucks is like they just weren't able to get anything for him. But I'm also glad at the same time that they didn't sell at the deadline. Like I wanted to see what that team could do, and unfortunately we didn't get to. But I do think it was a lot. Like despite not making the playoffs, I do think it was good experience for all guys like Nico Horner and other young dudes like playing in playoff type atmospheres in September.
How much fun was? I mean, even though they didn't make it, how much fun was August? That's the most fun they've had watching Cubs baseball in 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. And July as well. Like July and August were so fun. So yeah, I mean, to kind of round it out, Bellinger, starting pitcher, the sky's kind of the limit. I don't care how you do it, but I've been saying it on the show, like they need more swing and miss in the rotation. Like Steele's kind of like I don't want to say he's a pitch to contact guy, but he does give up contact. It's not like he's striking out 10 guys every start. Hendricks, pitch to contact type guy. Jameson Tyone, like I don't know. Yeah, but he is
even at his best, he's kind of that guy.
Yeah. Jordan Wicks, it's not like he's overpowering either. And also I'm optimistic that he'll build off this season and continue to grow next year too. So, but I still don't think he's some overpowering starting pitcher though. So,
and I think as good as he looked, I think he still projects to like a mid-rotation guy, which I think sometimes fans see like, oh, he's just a 3. You know how good a guy has to be a major league number 3 starting pitcher?
Right.
You're a really good fucking pitcher.
Right. So I guess, they need, like, whether it's Yamamoto, whether it's an Aaron Nola, whether it's, a trade for a pitcher out there. I mentioned Shane Bieber earlier, whether it's, just someone. To me, it's got to be high strikeout guy. And I'm hopeful that it doesn't block Cade Horton in any aspect, and I don't think the organization would let that happen because they picked up the option on Hendricks anyway. So worst comes to worst, if they don't bring him back after next year, Cade Horton could be that guy in 2025.
I think they'd be careful with Cade's workload too. Like he only threw 53 innings in college. He got 88 last year. I think they'll start him slow this year, and
it's fair.
The second half he'll be up.
Right, fair. So yeah. Bellinger, starting pitcher, you still got to add another bat too. Like it'd be so much easier if you weren't going into the offseason with this whole Bellinger thing, but you are. And to me, it's you got to bring Bellinger back, and then you got to add a bat, like a big bat, and trading for Soto, trading for Alonso. Is Canario the guy? I mean, I'd like to see Canario more for sure, but maybe you can use them as a trade piece. I don't know. They have a lot of options, I will say, in terms of trades. And maybe it's a guy I'm not even thinking of, but I think 2 big bats, that includes Bellinger, and then a starting pitcher. I think that they do those 3 things, and we're going to be predicting division championship at Wrigley next year.
And there's some margin guys I really like, but it'll depend on. I think they have to get those big bats first. Because if you get Shohei Ohtani, the DH position's dead for the next 6 years. Like Morel's not going to DH. That's Shohei Ohtani's job.
Right. And then that opens up. Like, can you actually play him at third?
Yeah. But like, if you don't get, if they don't get Bellinger, then maybe you look at like a Rhys Hoskins at first base. Just a lot of like, if this then that, or if this then not that. If they trade for Soto, does it mean Morel's gone? So then you got to get somebody for third base. But they're also at this unique position now where they've got sort of a core locked in. They've got Dansby and Horner and Happ and Seiya. You've got Amaya. Looks like he's probably going to have the catching position kind of locked up. And they got to find a way to improve the team while also still allowing some space for guys like PCA or Shaw or Canario. Like they're not all going to come up and be Cubs. Some of them are going to get traded off.
Yeah.
But like I don't want to see them go lock up a third baseman for 6 years, get a center fielder for 5 years, get a first baseman for 4 years, and have no spots for any of the kids to come up.
Right.
But you can't assume the kids either, like you were saying earlier.
Right. Well, Matt Shaw, I mean, he's skyrocketed through the system, right? Like
he looks so good right now.
He looks so good that it's like, can he come up next year? Like, and if the Cubs feel that way, then I don't mind if you end up having to use Morel, trade him for Juan Soto, right? I can stomach Nick Madrigal at third, I guess, or a platoon of him, of Madrigal and Patrick Wisdom for a handful of months until you decide to finally call Matt Shaw up. Like, I know that's not how the Cubs are operating in terms of like predicting like that's what they're going to do, but just for the sake of this conversation, like I guess I could get up for something like that because he was their first round pick and he has looked great and whatever. And if you still make the lineup better on top of, leaving that one hole to perhaps hopefully be able to insert that guy in there eventually this year, fine. So,
well, and here's a guy I'll ask you about. So I've seen a lot of chatter about Matt Chapman. He's a good player. He makes the Cubs better. I'm not that excited about him. I'm lower on him than a lot of people are. But
I'm pretty low on him.
But like, I wouldn't say leave third base open because Matt Shaw, because the Cubs need to win soon.
Right.
But I don't think you get Matt Chapman. Matt Chapman's not a reason to block out Matt Shaw.
I would no. If the Cubs didn't have Dansby Swanson, I'd say go get Matt Chapman.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? Like I just feel like,
or if they didn't have Nico Horner.
Yeah. I just feel like, and it's not even just because of defense, but like I just feel like they're similar type offensive players too.
Yeah,
like,
they're very similar.
Like he's not a guy you're going to hit in the middle of the order, and he can have a hot month. Like his April was great this year, but then it felt like he really trended down after that, and just wasn't very impressive. He was great defensively, right? Like the Gold Glove at third base. He wins it every year. If they signed him, they would have the best defensive infield in baseball.
Yeah.
But would their offense be any better? I don't think so. So, it'll be interesting to see like his market, considering he just really wasn't good most of the year. But he's not someone on my radar at all. I'd rather try and develop Morel into a better defensive third baseman and run him at third base for 600 at bats or whatever, and do that than sign Matt Chapman.
For sure.
So,
well, one thing that worked out is when we were going back and forth before this episode, I was like, maybe at the end we'll throw in a little Big Ten football filler. And we don't have to because we have Craig Counsell to talk about.
Well, we're saving the people listening the time because the Big Ten West is awful.
Did you see that game in Wrigley this weekend?
I did not go, but I did see some highlights, and all I can say is, as a betting man, I wish that it was legal to bet on schools in Illinois.
Well, that's right. They have that rule in Illinois, don't they?
Yeah, in Illinois, you can't bet on schools in Illinois unless you go to an actual sports book. And unfortunately, the DraftKings sportsbook outside Wrigley still doesn't have their licensing, so you can't even go place bets there. It's basically a bar and a restaurant right now. So to be able to go place a bet on a team in Illinois, I think you have to go to Waukegan to the new Circa Sportsbook, or I think there's a few points bet locations. Like,
hammer that.
If I would have had the energy and the want, I would have gone and put a ton of money on the under between Iowa and Northwestern.
Did you see the halftime under fell to 16.5?
I did not see that. No, I did not see that. 29.5 was already funny enough, but yeah,
that's hilarious.
The fact that it was the 7th highest score at Wrigley Field this year is just as
it's insane.
It's insane. So
should be great when Illinois and Iowa play in a couple weeks. That'll be.
I went to Illinois, Iowa at Memorial Stadium last fall. The game ended 9-6.
Yep, that was an ugly football game.
It was a very ugly football game. In defense to Illinois, their starting quarterback got hurt, and they were.
In defense to Iowa, they haven't had a quarterback in 4 years. So
that's true. Yeah.
So I saw. I didn't realize. I saw you started an Illinois podcast. Basketball?
I did. I started. Say that again.
Is it hoops only?
Yeah, just hoops only. I'm a very casual college football fan in terms of Illinois. I haven't followed their football program like I do the basketball program ever. Like when Illinois' football team has a random good year like last season where they get a bowl game and maybe they easily could have gone to the Big Ten championship last year but didn't. Like when they had a year where they win like 7 games like they did, I'll get up for it. I'll get excited. But I definitely follow the basketball program more than anything else. Have been since I was a kid, since they went to the Final Four. in 04-05. Yeah, when baseball's not on, I watch a ton of college basketball in the winter. And
I grew up in Iowa. I'm a Hawkeye. I went to Iowa, and Illinois is the team I've always hated the most.
Yeah, no, I love the rivalry
it's
between
a great rivalry
between Illinois and Iowa, especially these last few years. Like ever since they had like that, the coaches like almost brawled it out after that random game, and like I think it was a game before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Ever since like Brad Underwood and the coaching staff just almost fought Fran McCaffrey, I've definitely had a higher disdain for Iowa than I ever have in my entire life. But I just think the rivalries in college basketball or just college sports in general are so much more fun than the pro ones, because you can just tell how much more the players and the coaches care about the games itself and who they're playing. Not to say that the professional athletes don't care about, the rivalries between whatever, not to say that the Cubs don't get up to play the Cardinals every 13 games or whatever that they play every year. But when it comes to college sports, I think the atmospheres for those rivalry games are so much more entertaining and fun. And yeah, I'm looking forward to Illinois and Iowa this winter, because I still haven't forgot about all the slander I had to take from the game last year when the Orange Crush got like caught like sneaking in or something. Whatever it was. It was
so overblown, but it was also hilarious at the same time.
It was so overblown by Iowa fans. People were saying they should be arrested, and like it's like they do this every year. They go to a different school and they do this every year. Like Orange Crush is looked at as one of the top like student sections in college basketball.
It's annoyed me so much over the years when Iowa's not good and they come in and take the stadium over. It just pisses me off.
Yeah.
But props to them. It's good.
In general, I really do enjoy the rivalry between Illinois and Iowa. I love it more than the rivalry with Indiana. My guy Greg Braggs from CHGO Bears, he's a huge Purdue guy. He does his own Purdue podcast, and
Purdue can go away.
Yeah, like I for his sake, I've kind of shifted my hatred, I guess, for Purdue just because of him. Even though he can be ridiculous and a little over the top, but their radio guy does listen to CHGO Cubs, and it's like, okay,
all right, so he's not all bad.
Yeah, he's not all bad. Not everyone at Purdue sucks, whatever. But yeah, so I don't loathe them as much as I guess I used to, just because of him. But a lot of people who don't watch the Big Ten, they all think the conference is overrated. But man, when you get into January and you have these rivalry games or just these conference games, no matter who it is, it's just grinded out, like defense.
They're so physical.
It's so physical. Yeah. It's so much fun to watch if you love that type of basketball. I mean, I know a lot of people love the up and down game and points, but man, you get in the Big Ten and it feels like a war out there, and I genuinely love watching it. So
this has been great, Cody. Thanks for coming on.
For sure.
I will tell everybody listening, Cody Delmendo is a fantastic follow on social media. Your Twitter and your TikTok games are both strong.
I appreciate it.
Where can people find you?
Yeah, you can follow me on, like you said, on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok at Cody_CHGO. I'm on Threads too. I've gotten into the routine of sending a thread once a day. Just because like I feel like it's going to make a comeback and I want to be there when it makes the comeback. So
I post my episodes. I just can't get engaged on those other like Blue Sky and Threads. And I'm there, but I'm not really there.
Right. So I'm at those four the most, and my YouTube channel where we just talking about Illinois. Like if you're an Illini fan, I'm doing all my Illini podcast stuff over on my YouTube channel, or you can find it on Spotify. Either way, if you go follow me on X or Twitter, you'll be able to find all the rest of my stuff there. It's all at the link in my bio that I have. So, I appreciate you again having me on, and it's a lot of fun, man.
Yeah, I appreciate it, and we'll be hearing you soon, I'm sure, tomorrow on CHGO.
Yeah, our show tomorrow is at 6 instead of 1:20 because Ryan is at the GM meetings.
Right.
And I don't exactly remember why we moved the show to 6, but I think it has to do with how the schedule that he has at the GM meetings with all the stuff that will be happening that day. So yeah, our show's tomorrow night instead of during the day. But yeah, should be a fun one. And I'm ready to, ride this roller coaster of the off season.
Yeah. Well, hopefully maybe we'll have you on later to talk about some of the big moves the Cubs made.
Absolutely. I'm more than happy to.
Great. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us today. Cody is always a great listen. If you like this episode, please drop a rating and a review wherever it is you get your podcasts and share an episode with a friend. Just a few seconds from you gives me great feedback and helps other Cub fans find the show. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Blue Sky, and YouTube, all at CubsPS Plus. And check out the Patreon page at cubspsplus.patreon.com to help support the show. As always, the theme music for this podcast is Prospect Park West by Jerry McCoy. This is Mike Waller, host of the Cubs PS Plus podcast. Every day with Cubs baseball or talking about Cubs baseball is a great day. Go Cubs!